So in this video, I'm going to show you the video that got me over 1 million views and counting. But before I show you the video, I want to give you some background. I do not have a huge YouTube channel. I have a small channel. Before I posted this video, I probably had around 9,000 subscribers. My channel is very, very small relative to the YouTube community. So I'm an instructor for engineering technology programs, and I sometimes use YouTube to post instructional videos to help students and to help people learn about the career field of engineering technology. So first, let's watch the video. And then I'm gonna tell you why I think this video went viral. Really not gonna create a new alloy right now. I'm just gonna get solder and smear it over the surface of this copper plate. And what's gonna happen is there's not gonna be enough bonding between the solder, and there's no mixing of the solder and the copper. And so there's really no good, strong physical, mechanical connection that takes place. To illustrate that, let me go ahead and take a screwdriver and just scrape that solder off, right? That comes off super easy. I barely have to push on it. Now let's take a look at a smaller piece of copper. And this piece is going to be way easier for my iron to heat. I don't have a particularly high power soldering iron, so I'm using a small work piece so that I can get the solder to wet the workpiece properly. So here you can see that the solder is actually wetting the copper. It's not being smeared on, it's flowing properly onto the surface, mixing and alloying. Now if I go ahead and take a screwdriver and try to scrape that off, it's going to be much harder to get off. The biggest controversy in this video is when I talk about doing soldering, I say that the materials alloyed together. Now, stick with me here. Here's where the controversy lies. A lot of people are saying soldering is not alloying. Welding would be alloying. And who is right? Okay, so in order to understand my perspective on this, you're going to have to understand who I am. I was a research scientist before I was an educator, and I used to work in material science, where we looked at very, very small, thin films, things at the atomic level. And so when I just naturally think sometimes in terms of these really small scales, and it's no problem for me. Where a lot of people are thinking, especially if you're a welder or somebody with welding experience, you understand that welding has to do with really, you're taking two materials and you are making an alloy in the bulk of that material. Now with soldering, it's very, very different. There is a very small, and I mean very, very small amount of alloying that happens in soldering, and it happens only on the interface of the two metals, right? So what happens is you get this thing called an intermetallic, which some people will argue, well, that's not really an alloy. Once again, this gets back to why something becomes viral. It's because it's somewhat controversial. Now, I had no idea this video was going to be controversial in this sense. I didn't even think about it. This was just my mind being a material scientist saying, like, oh yeah, there's this little bit of material that's going to mix together, create an intermetallic, and that's going to form a bond and help it stick together. And that's what I was trying to explain in the video. And, obviously people were like, no, there's no alloy that occurs. And what they're trying to say is, hey, the mass majority of the metal is not creating a new alloy. Totally agree with that. And I should have done a better job of explaining that in the video. Although, to be honest, it's a short video, and short videos are just not good for nuanced conversations. Now, another reason this video went kind of viral is because of, I think a lot of viral videos have this. There's some form of miscommunication or something that needs to be corrected. And one of the things that people really enjoyed correcting was how I pronounced the word solder, okay? People thought, dude, you can't be teaching about soldering if you don't pronounce it soldering. Solder, not solder, right? Because there is an L, right? So solder or solder. Now, if you're in the United States and you work with soldering, you know that that's like a normal way to pronounce it. However, there's plenty of countries throughout the world who will do a more phonetic pronunciation of solder. Now, which one's right? Which one's the correct pronunciation? Okay, either one is correct. It just depends on where you are, where you're located, and what's common. You want to be able to communicate so people understand you. Now, to be fair, I'm right. It's solder. And the reason is, I'll go back to a really old blog post done on EEV blog where if you do some research in this, the original creation and pronunciation of this word was based off some really interesting information. So I'm going to show that on the screen right now, and I'll let you be the judge. And perhaps the third reason that that this video went really wild as far as views and comments and likes and all these things was that people thought I was tricking them. They thought what I was showing them in the demonstration was a just absolute trick. And so what they said was, oh, well, the first time you tried to solder the copper plate, you didn't use any flux. And in the second time, it's clear, I can see the flux. There it is right there. And so people, in their minds, are thinking that all of this, I'm making up. It has nothing to do with the size of the plate. It all has to do with the flux that I use next time, or the angle at which I was holding the iron, and all these little nuanced things that they were trying to come up with. And in some ways, they're not wrong to say that flux doesn't matter, the angle of the iron doesn't matter, the contact area, those things are important, but they just completely miss the point of what I was trying to teach them, that if you have a big surface that you need to solder onto, something that's going to dissipate heat rapidly, you're not going to be able to transfer heat quick enough, which is why in the second part, I make the plate smaller, so there's a lot less heat that has to be transferred into that copper plate in order to heat it up. And so I was able to heat it up effectively and get the solder to wet onto the surface. So a lot of people just thought I'm, trying to trick them, that I used flux on the second time when I didn't the first time. Completely false. Okay, both times I used the exact same solder. I didn't add any extra flux. Both solders, it was the same solder, and that both, it includes flux. Okay, the solder has flux in it. All right, so I'm using flux core solder. Now, to be fair to them, what they might be observing is on the first solder that I did with the large plate, what I did was, I tried to solder it on there, and then I had to scrape off that excess material, and you probably get a slightly cleaner surface when I went to do it the second time. And so they're probably seeing that cleaner surface, and they think that that was me like cheating the system, but it's really not cheating the system, okay? If you do the experiment yourself, go verify it yourself, that this actually works. If your plate is too big, if your copper, if the work is too large and you can't heat it up, you're not going to be able to get the solder to wet. So some things I learned about the YouTube algorithm through this whole experience was, okay, viral stuff are things that are going to get lots of comments and interactions, right? And the best way to get comments and interactions is to have something that's controversial, to have something that people don't think you're saying is right, and they want to correct you. Okay, so if you're wondering why there's so much like animosity and hate on social media, because people love to comment on the things they don't agree with and they hate, and so it always brings those things up to the surface of social media. So anytime you're seeing all this stuff on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, just know that you're kind of playing into that algorithm where, and I don't ever intend to make videos that are specifically targeting this, but that's what's happening, right? We're getting videos that are extremely controversial rising to the surface because people love to comment, like, share, fight back with each other on social media. It's solder. No, it's soldering. It's solder. No, it's solder. It's solder. No, it's solder. It's an alloy. It's not an alloy. Oh, it's an alloy. And people go back and forth, and it creates all this interaction, but you're playing into the algorithm itself. And so just to be aware of that, as you use social media, and what you elevate to the surface and what you comment on, all that matters. So hope you learned something from this video. Feel free to check out some of our other videos. If you want to learn more about soldering and about engineering technology, check out some of our other content, as well as check out our website that has soldering kits that you can practice with.